Voice of the Public is a production of KRWG, your source for public media in southern New Mexico and far west Texas.
Thanks for joining us on Voice of the Public. I'm Fred Martino. This year, KRWG is partnering with the Las Cruces Sun News and nmpolitics.net on election coverage. And we're partnering with you. This program is just one example of how we're reaching out to the community. Over the next hour, we'll hear what local voters expect from Las Cruces city government. With a mayoral seat and 3 city council seats up for grabs this fall, big changes are possible in local government. I'm joined today by Walt Rubel and Diana Alba Soular of the Las Cruces Sun News. And our voters include in row 1, Republicans Marvin Nakashima and Dolores Connor, and Independent Eric Kotkowski. And in row 2, Democrats joining us today, Jason Rivera and Barbara Alvarez. Thank you all for being with us today, and we appreciate you volunteering for Voice of the Public.
Thank you.
To start off with, I want to ask a very general question, and this one really goes beyond the Las Cruces election to your expectations in general of our public officials. What are the most important qualities, in your view, for folks who want to serve the public?
Well, since I'm I moved here from the Washington D.C. area, so I've lived here for 4 years, and I think the key thing that I've noticed about the council is they seem to be not partisan, and they're thinking about the city as a first priority. Because where I lived, politics can override the values of what may be the community values. So I think that's what I would look for is. Their first priority is the good of the city, as opposed to any particular political beliefs they might have. I think the council, it seems that's what it tends to be. They tend to be city first, politics second.
Other thoughts?
I would say that overall the city council needs to be very open to the public and very visible to the public and participate within the public, not just within the chambers. But the most important part about city government and in this city is that the candidates don't need to be financial people, but they need to understand how to run finances and how to read a budget, because ultimately that is the tool that keeps the council and the city moving. And if you can't understand where the money's coming from, then all you understand is that you need more money. And until you understand that that's not the answer, it's really difficult to understand a government financial statement.
Yeah, and I wanted to add on to these comments. I believe something essential as well for our public officials is the ability to look beyond the short-term gains. I feel politicians often enough, they want to do short-term wins in order to ensure their short-term re-election or to ensure the short-term, happiness of their constituents. Sometimes it's necessary to make tough decisions that are not necessarily popular, but in the long term have more benefits to our community than might be foreseen.
I would add to echo what Ms. Connor said. They didn't understand finances, yes, but I look for somebody that I can identify with that understands what we have going on in Las Cruces as a citizen. I've lived here all my life. I need somebody that can relate to that. In addition to reading the finances and stuff like that, but I need somebody that, again, understands the struggles that we go through as the citizens. And
I agree with Jason. Too many of our young people are leaving New Mexico, Las Cruces, and they're going elsewhere because the jobs just aren't here. And I'm going to go back to a term that was used in the 1990s. We're experiencing a brain drain. And when people leave, Las Cruces loses.
Okay, very interesting.
Could I add just one
Yes.
small comment to that? When you sit as a political official, the short-term effect is what Eric just talked about, but every decision you make doesn't have a consequence for 3 to 5 years from the time you've made it. You don't even know how it's affected the city until years after that vote has been taken.
Okay. Well, I wanted to ask what sort of accessibility and responsiveness do you expect from your elected officials in terms of being able to reach them, whether it's by phone, by email, and these days we even have social media as an option. And once you do get that message through, what are you expecting to happen after that?
I believe they should be readily accessible at all times because they do work for us, the public. Applying common sense, of course, but they should always be available. There should be an open door policy for the most part. I understand they're busy, other priorities going on, but at the end of the day, the priority is the public.
A good example would be the recent explosions that we've had. Mayor Miyagishima has gotten onto Facebook and he's posted news releases and updates saying what's happening, what's being found out as much as he's able to do. And that's, for me at least, it's reassured me as to what is happening and what law enforcement is doing.
Yeah, well, I come from a background of previously working in federal government. And of course, when you're at that level, when a constituent reaches out to you, it's much more difficult to make that connection. And I've noticed by being here, I guess in Las Cruces or more local elections, it's usually fairly easy to get a hold of your elected officials. And I think it's their responsibility to be as open as possible. And like you said, sometimes it's not possible, sometimes there are meetings or there's other priorities, but there should always be a way to get back to the public or communicate constantly on what's happening. Either like Mayor Miyagishima posting news and posting what's happening or other elected officials doing that, I guess, same communication. I think the more they engage the public, the more we can know what's happening and understand what's happening and where their priorities stick. And that way we can put in our own input and perhaps even change their minds or at least understand why they're voting the way they're voting.
I have some policy things I want to get to as we go along here, but I want to follow up quickly on what Jason said earlier about the uniqueness of Las Cruces and you having lived here your whole life and having a real appreciation for that. Are there one or two things, and I take it from that you don't think that everybody running for office necessarily has to have been born and raised here, but they need to understand the community. Are there any one or two things that anybody running for office really needs to get about Las Cruces that makes it unique, that makes it different, and if you want to run this community, you really need to understand?
Based on my experience, and again, not expecting that question, culture, for sure, just the wide mix of culture we have here. I've watched the town, as many of us have that even been here that long. It's just exploded. There's a lot of development. It's gotten really big from since I was a child. So that growth also needs to be taken into account, combined with that culture. And then there's other things in there that the wage disparity, some wages, jobs, things like this. But I think we had to pin it down to one thing. It's just how many people we have here. What exactly makes up Las Cruces culture?
I would add to that, also being born and raised in Las Cruces and family here for over a few hundred years, the whole situation is that right now I don't see that Las Cruces has an identity. It doesn't have a culture base that shows where we've been and how that is a strength to our community. I think that when elected officials, whether they've been born here or have decided to run in this community, one aspect that they need to do is go to every department head before they even decide to run for office and interview that department head and see where the direction of the city is, and then they could make decisions as to what they would change based on that. But until you meet with the department heads, you don't know how the utilities work, you don't know how the parks work, you don't know how the city manager works. And the city manager is very open to having his directors meet with individuals. And I think you should interview all 10 of them before you even decide to run for office.
Well, I'd like to respectfully disagree a little bit. I'm not a Las Cruces native. I moved here a year ago. I'm originally from El Paso, and I kind of grew up here in Mesilla Valley, just going up and down. But I was born and raised in El Paso, Texas. I moved abroad for 7 years to get my bachelor's and master's degree and work as well. But when I wanted to come back to the United States, both my wife and I moved to Las Cruces. We wanted to come to Las Cruces because we liked the culture here in New Mexico. I like it better than El Paso, I think it's friendlier. I appreciate the multiculturalism and appreciate the embrace that New Mexico has for its heritage, more so than other places I've been to in the United States. And so that's one of the reasons we moved back to Las Cruces, is because of the culture. It's because of its identity. And I think that's probably our city's biggest strength. And now I'm here as a Las Cruces resident, and I'm very happy, and I'm part of the counter brain drain, but unfortunately we can still have a lot more to work on that. So.
I also have to respectfully disagree because my sons were heavily involved with the mariachi conference before they moved out of town, and we do have not only the mariachi, not only the Hispanic, but we also have the Native American, and we have African Americans here. So we've got at least 5 cultures here, if not more.
So this is a great group because we've got folks who grew up in Las Cruces or grew up, in your case, Eric, in the area, in El Paso. And Marvin, you moved here, you retired here, correct? Okay, so I want to ask all of you, hopefully you can come up with one thing at least that you think Las Cruces city government needs to do to improve our city. When you think about the city of Las Cruces and you think about, boy, this we need to do a better job in this area or with this service, what comes to mind first?
Jobs.
Jobs.
Well, since I'm a retiree, a lot of my concerns with what the city does are quality of life things, and I think they're paying a lot of attention. You know, I rode my bike to the studio here today, so I like to get out and have bike trails as opposed to riding on the streets, and so continued more bike trails, I suppose. But I guess one thing that's kind of interesting, one of the things that's bothered me since I came here, and since we have the person with the newspaper as a source of what's going on, often I don't know I can't find a place where there's a go-to place to find out for activities. It's kind of like you have to go to university for this thing, you have to go to the news bulletin or your paper for activities in the area. But I don't like to be hopping around. If the city could, maybe be a go-to place for events, so like go to one place as opposed to having to hop around to find out, particularly university. It's very hard to find out the open forums that they have on the university for purposes of education of a particular topic.
Other things that the city needs to do better.
Well, I think one of the big things, and I guess being a young professional, there should be much more engagement from, I guess, young professionals in Las Cruces. There's the Chambers of Commerce organization. Then there's many others like me who are not necessarily part of that organization, but still want to be active and still want to be involved. Because, my wife and I, we decided to move to Las Cruces. We recently bought a home. We want to stay here and raise our, we don't have kids yet, but we would like to raise our kids here and have them have a successful, life. And so one of the things that I think is very important is to have everybody be part of this, but to be more engaged with young professionals, because ultimately, to say polite, the younger people are going to be the future of the city, and there should be a way to engage them to be more active and more aware of their civic duties, to be more responsible, and to be aware of what's happening here.
I think the city focuses on the youngsters. I'm talking, high school and younger, and the senior population, but it's that middle population, that 35 to 50-year-old that is working so hard at a job to meet their family needs and exist, that the city doesn't have an approach to how you work with those groups of people. You have a lot of senior services and you have a lot of children's services, but in the middle of all that, how do you interact with that middle-aged person who has limited time outside of work but needs to have a quality of life that gives them access to the city?
Okay, this is sort of a follow-up to that question, but the city, in addition to these very broad-scale policies and programs that it has, it's responsible for very basic services like providing good sidewalks and streets, animal control, utilities, trash service. And I just wanted to see in your own neighborhoods, are there any issues that you have with any of those services, or are they satisfactory? Just what's your take on how the city is offering those services and providing those services?
Well, sorry. Well, for me, again, I just recently bought a home like 2 weeks ago, and I was very nervous because I know, at least growing up in El Paso, when you go to the government, lines forever. For Las Cruces, I was very impressed how seamless it was. It was so fast, it was so efficient, the people were very professional. I got to sit waiting to get my electric service, and people were yelling at the city employees, and they were so respectful. I was amazed, not being used to that level of government service. In terms of water and electricity and waste management, so far it's been great. And I'm very happy compared to other places that I've lived in. I think Las Cruces really has that focus on its citizens, and I'm pretty happy about that, at least from my experience.
The only thing I could add is, could they add glass recycling to their recycling program?
They do have recycling. There is a glass recycling. It's a delivery, but it's not in front of your house. But you can deliver it to bins that are in different locations by color, and you just have to deliver it yourself. But overall, the infrastructure, such as the utilities and waste management and stuff, I see those employees, and I've known them for many, many years, that they are really working really hard, and they have the basics of what it takes to keep the customer happy. I never have a problem with trash being picked up. I never have a problem with grappler. I never have a problem with water not running. Although the electricity is not part of the city, it turns on every day. But I'm telling you that overall, in those particular services that are just everyday utilities, are very well managed within this community.
I would agree. The infrastructure is great. The only thing I think I would change is roads. We need some better roads. A lot of our roads are pretty run down.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's countywide.
Yes.
So.
I do want to get into some of this policy stuff, and one of the ones I'd like to start with was the vote that the City Council took in 2013 to raise the gross receipts tax. They did that in response to a bill that the state legislature passed that would have, over the course of several years, reduced the amount of state monies coming into the city. There's been a lot of disagreement on that, as anybody following city government understands. On one side, the council is saying that this was prudent planning in order to get ahead of what we know is going to be an upcoming shortage in future years. On the other side were folks who said, well, there are things that you could have done in terms of cutting the budget, other ways that you could have prepared for this other than raising the taxes. I'd like to get your input on what you think about that decision.
Well, as a new person here, I'm not certain. There must be some distinction why they call it a gross receipts tax versus a sales tax.
There is, and it's very complicated. Essentially, you're taxing, and Dolores, you can maybe help me on this. You may know more about it than I do, but my understanding is you're not necessarily taxing the sale, you're taxing the transaction. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. And my other understanding is it was done in order to take advantage of a lot of lost money that they would have gotten from the federal government,
Right.
in terms of, so.
There's something to consider in the sales tax that was increased. First of all, why did they go to the maximum availability? Second of all, why did they go 3 years prior to there even being an effect to the community? So now they're collecting over $10 million 3 years prior to that. What bothers me about that whole project is, or that whole vote was that the city has 2.5 times the required reserves. I don't believe that city government or any government should be holding on to our taxpayer dollars over and above what they need when those taxpayer dollars should be used as they come in. It's not supposed to be a savings account. The whole reason the state asked for 1/12 is just if you get into a bind. But the bonding power for the city of Las Cruces is at the maximum level. They have the best rating, so borrowing money is not difficult for them. But holding more reserve than they need, now that we've come sort of out of this recession, I think is not handling our taxpayer dollars correctly.
Other thoughts on the gross receipts tax? The increase.
I just think it was a very unfortunate vote that had to be cast. It stuck between a rock and a hard place on that one from where I see it. I think the outcry was immense. Obviously a lot of people didn't want it. I can't say that anybody wanted it. I think it was more people that understood it had to be done, or it should be done.
Was this done because that's the sole source of increasing income? A lot of places I've lived in, they could change the property tax to get income from voters or property owners. Is this the go-to way to get funding, increased funding for the city?
For cities in New Mexico, their main source of revenue is the gross receipts tax. They do, I believe, get some portion of property tax, but sales tax is sort of what they always talk about as one of their main sources of revenue.
Because I'd say 9% is pretty high. When I was living in Maryland, it's only about 5%. And Maryland's certainly not a low tax state. So I was kind of surprised by that.
Yeah. Property taxes in Doña Ana County are across New Mexico are low compared to other states, but the majority of the property tax goes to the county coffers, not the city coffers. Okay. They only get a portion of it.
Well, certainly controversial, gross receipts tax, and not only for the city of Las Cruces, but of course the county recently raising the gross receipts tax. So again, lots of controversy about that, and we're going to hear more about it because there's also a lawsuit that's underway in terms of allowing the double increase in the city of Las Cruces, city residents facing both the increase from the city and the county, and that's being fought in court. So, another controversy I've got for you. You knew this question was coming, I'm sure, with the deep divisions that happened over a citizen initiative to increase the minimum wage. I'd like to know from you, do you think the council should have allowed a public vote on this issue rather than what ended up happening? Thoughts on this?
I'd say no.
No, shouldn't have allowed a public vote. Why not?
Well, because given the way it was, this law was written, it gave the council a means to amend it. Now, maybe that's not what the people that proposed the petition wanted, but still, it gave them the ability to, as elected officials, to deal with this thing in a way that I thought was very good. What I kind of found a little strange is they didn't provide a means of evaluating. Sounds to me like they don't know how to decide whether it was, positive, neutral, or negative. So that was kind of thing that when they passed the law, that they seem to be confused as how they're going to evaluate it. And I think there's plenty of government statistics that should be able to help you out. But I got the impression that they were just they thought it was good to do it the way they did it, but how are they going to evaluate it?
Okay. Other thoughts on the decision not to allow a public vote on the minimum wage? I
say a public vote would have been difficult because who is going to go to the polls? The person that wants an increase to their salary with no commitment or additional working experience or anything to the employer. So who would vote no for giving themselves a raise? So that was just, the way they handled it was not great, but to put it out to the public, I would never turn myself down from a pay increase.
Differing thoughts on this. Any other thoughts?
I believe the public is well informed enough to be able to make a decision on their own. I disagree that they would vote just based on their own personal interest. I do believe that we know the issues. I personally would not have supported it, for example, if it came to public vote. But at the same time, I also have to agree that public votes can get very complicated. We elect our officials to represent us, and it might be that you might be a Republican and you're represented by a Democrat, or you're a Democrat and represented by a Republican. But the majority, at least, of that district voted for this candidate, and it's the candidate's job to be able to, or the elected official now, to be able to make that decision and weigh both opinions. Now, if the opinion that the city council, I guess at the end of the day voted on, is not what let's say maybe half or 45 or 49% of the residents agreed with, then that's the trouble with democracy. And that's the challenges that we have as living in a democratic state. A public vote would have, it's difficult to say how it would have turned out, right? But just once you have one public vote, then I think that leads for more referendums and more public votes, and then that could lead to some sort of disorder or lack of power.
But just so I understand you started by saying that a public vote would have been a good idea.
No.
No, you didn't.
I said I disagree that our public would vote for their own personal interests, like that they would make uninformed decisions or vote for their own increase in salary. I believe the public is well informed enough and responsible enough to be able to make a decision. The thing is, and this is when it gets really complicated and have the nuances of a democracy and of government, what's the point of having elected officials if they're not going to make decisions? I guess that's the idea of a federal government.
What about those who might argue, and I've heard this argument, that adjustments could have been made to the minimum wage law regardless of whether or not you prevent the public from voting. And in fact, if you have a vote, you have the ability then, if for instance it passed, to gauge the level of support. So then if you make changes to it, you have a better understanding of, okay, this idea has very strong support, or it's moderate support, or in the case of it failed, it failed. And then what do you do? So,
but to me that sounds like a poll. It doesn't sound like a public vote. Or are you suggesting a non-binding public vote?
No, I'm just asking the question. If it went up for a vote, which essentially that's what the city charter says, is to have a vote on the public initiative, or if you don't have a vote, to vote for it. Then if you vote against it, the public decides. So other thoughts on this?
But that process became very convoluted at the very end, and it became a political ball. It was had nothing to do with anything else except politics. And that's where the city council should be nonpartisan in doing that. They were divided from the beginning. They were pushing agendas that were not particularly of any one position, but they were pushing agendas for a group. And then when it came down to voting no, so that it could be publicly voted, the ones that were on that other side decided to
So it sounds like
shut
Dolores,
it down.
it sounds like, Dolores, are you suggesting then that the city charter should be changed?
There are
because the
changes
charter says vote no and let the public decide, or vote yes and the law goes forward. In fact, as you know, that's not what happened. They voted yes, but dramatic changes were made to the law. So that
they played within the rules of the charter, and that's why the charter needs to be adjusted.
Oh, so it does need to be adjusted.
It does need to be adjusted, and the only way the charter is adjusted is by public vote.
Did they live up to the spirit of the charter?
They did.
They did.
I think they did, because they played the political ball, and then they made the decisions on the yes and no's and how it was going to go into effect. And so the charter needs to be adjusted, and that requires a public vote.
Other thoughts?
I believe it should have gone to public vote, but that said, I also believe it would have passed by a large margin had it gone to public vote. And if that had occurred, they cushioned the blow somewhat by what they did. It's not such a big wage increase initially. So I think they did what they had to do. I don't know how much an election would have cost, but or a vote, putting it to the vote. But I think right there they saved some money, because I'm like Dolores said, nobody's going to vote themselves down a raise.
The cost of living increases. We understand how it affects us when cost of living goes up and our wages stay stagnant. We know that it costs more for us to buy the same amount of food, to pay rent, to put gas in the car, and our salaries are not increasing.
Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts? All right.
Okay. Well, I was going to ask, the city has been attempting to promote economic development by attracting new companies and industry, and there's also been an emphasis to boost the film industry locally. Do you think the city is taking the right steps to increase economic activity? And do you have any suggestions about how they should be doing things different if you don't think they're taking the right course?
If I may, I think the city of Las Cruces has many things they can offer to new businesses coming in, but at the same time, by raising gross receipts taxes, by increasing the minimum wage, these are issues that delay perhaps companies moving into Las Cruces. Now, I work directly in economic development, but down in Santa Teresa in the county, and these are some of the issues that we face at least with my company, we're trying to recruit more businesses. It's very challenging. So, while I believe there's so much to offer from this region, especially the fact that we have Mexico, which is 45, Juarez, the city of Juarez is 45 miles down south. These are tremendous advantages, and I don't believe the city is taking advantage of its border with Mexico. Or the county is taking advantage of its border with Mexico, and I guess the city's proximity to the border of Mexico. I don't think raising gross receipts taxes or minimum wage initially helps attract businesses. At the same time, I do understand why this is necessary. And that's when it comes back to our elected officials making those tough decisions versus short-term versus long-term gain. And how do you balance that? And it's difficult.
Economic development is what's going to drive a city. And if you don't have new industry coming to the city that is above the average minimum wage or average medium wage of Las Cruces, which I don't remember where it is now, but it was in the 30,000s back when I remember. We have a West Mesa Industrial Park. It was developed 25, 28 years ago. It should be full of businesses. Las Cruces has a lot to offer those businesses, but we haven't been able to garner any really strong industry that employs more than 100 people because we don't offer them the services that they need in Las Cruces. First of all, one of the things at the West Mesa Industrial Park that changed is the fire station that was put in at the municipal airport. That changed insurance for those businesses at West Mesa Industrial Park by over 50% savings because they finally had a fire station closer than 9 miles away. That's a good move on the city's part. But now it's time to go bring those businesses to Las Cruces into that park that actually employ hundreds of people. And we have the initiative to do it, we have the property to do it, we have a program called LIDA that allows us to do it with them. We just don't have the access on how to get to those people.
To answer your question about these incentives, I've heard economists say that does not meet the criteria. Overall, if you look at the amount of incentives we give to film companies that come in, I don't think I kind of think it's like a lot of big cities. I used to live in D.C., and they built a new stadium. The city built it, and they said, well, that's going to help the city's economy. Well, when they look back at who they got hired, there are not enough skilled people in the building trades in D.C. to take those jobs that they're supposed to be the benefit to the city. So I'm beginning to think that it's nice to say I'm doing something, but I think economically you say a lot of these incentives they're trying to do to bring businesses don't really meet the economic test of what you say they're going to bring into the state.
Are you referring to the state's film incentive
Yes,
program?
yes.
Okay.
But there are, I guess, the
well.
governor is pushing a lot of incentives to attract industry. In fact, I'd like to know what kind of incentives what kind of industry or what kind of businesses would come into Las Cruces. It looks to me like there's a big dichotomy between education with a bachelor's degree level versus high school, and there's in between. I don't know that there's. That's how I see it.
Well, and to give some perspective on that, we actually just got numbers this week during this taping on the current economic conditions in New Mexico, and specifically for the Las Cruces metro area. Even though there were a lot of concerns in the business community about the minimum wage going up, the retail area, where a lot of folks start at the minimum wage, actually between June of 2014 And June of 2015, the retail area was a positive area for jobs. Jobs went up by 3.9% in retail. The areas where we're struggling are the higher paid jobs. Manufacturing down by over 8%. Mining and natural resources down by over 14%. And goods producing down by almost 12%. Eric, where you work, you're a bright spot in the Las Cruces metro area. Wholesale trade is up 25%,
Absolutely.
the largest increase between June of 14 and June of 15. So we know a little bit from these numbers about what's doing well, what's not doing so well. And sadly, it gets to the fact that, in fact, the higher wage job sectors are not doing well. And New Mexico, as you I'm sure all know, we already have a median income far below the national median. So,
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, if I may add to this, I mean, it's a good point that you bring up. I work in Santa Teresa, and my company, we're a short line railroad in Santa Teresa, New Mexico, and we offer services to be able to attract companies and provide a superb rail service as compared to what you could get here in Las Cruces or even in El Paso. And one of the things that I've noticed, at least something that bothers me a lot in the city of Las Cruces, is I've noticed that there's many people brush away the economic growth and economic potential of Santa Teresa, New Mexico. And for example, just as an example, our company, we have 12 employees. 11 of them are from New Mexico. 1 is from El Paso. And of those, 9 of those employees are from Las Cruces. And I know many other companies in Santa Teresa where the majority of their employees are Las Crucens. So maybe perhaps our industry or our companies or our manufacturing plants are not located within city limits, but we do hire New Mexicans. And those are good paying jobs that Las Crucens can take advantage of. And I haven't seen the city embrace Santa Teresa, and I haven't seen the community embrace the South County and the Mexican border
Eric,
in the
just
way
so
that I
I'm
think it should be.
clear, when you say that a good number of your workers are Las Crucens, you mean they live in Las Cruces and work in Santa
And commute,
Teresa, like
absolutely,
you?
like me. Yes.
Commute, like
I mean,
you.
one of our
Okay.
employees just bought property in Chaparral. One of them lives in Anthony, but they're New Mexicans, but the majority are from Las Cruces, and that's, in my opinion, a greater benefit for the whole county, because the strength of the county is the border with Mexico and the opportunity that we have to cooperate with Mexican manufacturing companies. And it's Santa Teresa is set to become a logistics hub of the region, and definitely the biggest economic driving force of the county. And I don't see Las Cruces embracing it as much as it should be, in my opinion.
So maybe there needs to be like a change of thinking in terms of seeing Las
Perhaps.
Cruces as attached to the
Yeah.
South County, and it's one whole rather
we don't
than
see
separate
ourselves as
parts.
competitors as Las Cruces, but I feel that Las Cruces see Santa Teresa as a competitor. And I know many people I commute to Santa Teresa most every day. Many people commute to Santa Teresa. It's a 45-minute commute. We do it because it's a job. We do it because, some of us enjoy working in Santa Teresa. There are many reasons why. And that's, for example, one of the reasons I came back. I was living abroad. I was living in China for 2 years, and I wanted to come back. I was living in Germany. I was living in Israel, where I got my degree. And I got tired of living abroad, and I wanted to come home. And I came home to New Mexico, and I got a job in Santa Teresa. I didn't find a job in Las Cruces. My wife found a job in Las Cruces, but it took her some time. Santa Teresa is where the jobs are, and Santa Teresa is where the economic development is in this community. So I think there should be more focus on that.
Kind of echoing what he said, I think you said Las Cruces metro area, and that is something that needs to be taken into account, because it's not just the city of Las Cruces anymore. On one level it is, but you even said it, Las Cruces metro area. There's a whole bunch of other things right there that we need to take into consideration.
Yeah.
So the economic development within Las Cruces compared to the metro area is two separate things.
And of
But
course, there
they're
are some
combined.
folks thinking even broader borderplex, and in particular, a lot of efforts to try to get more direct flights out of El Paso to attract more companies here, because companies want direct flights. And so
that's a
there's
huge challenge.
talk about that. You said that's true,
Yeah, that's
right?
a huge challenge, absolutely. I travel once a month for my business, and just traveling out of this region it's a pain. I mean, if you're going to Dallas or you're going to Houston, fine, but I travel to St. Louis very often. I travel to many other places, and it's always a problem.
Okay.
I want to touch on the issue of downtown revitalization. I moved here in 2002, At that time, the city was many years and many millions of dollars into trying to correct what I think a lot of people think were mistakes made in the 1960s and 70s. Here we are 15 years later, many more millions of dollars into it. And the new plan now is a downtown plaza that will go in where Bank of the West, where their drive-through is. I'd like to ask, are any of you excited about the idea of a plaza downtown and what that potentially could mean to the community? And what do you think about what it's going to take to really have a vibrant downtown where people are going at night, where there's electricity, it's a place people want to go to? I mean, we're clearly not there yet. So about the plaza and downtown both, what is it going to take, do you think?
I am excited about it because, well, with my family's involvement in entertainment, my sons having been in the mariachi, there is that aspect, but we have to make it happen. We have to generate the publicity, and we have to say, you don't have to go to Albuquerque's Civic Plaza, you don't have to go to El Paso's Plaza Theater, you can come here and have some high-level entertainment.
Go ahead.
I think that overall a lot of time has been and money has been spent in the downtown area, and during this whole time in the last, I think it's now been 5 years, that a tax increment district was put in. That plaza is being paid by those people who live within those boundaries. It's not someone who's living up in Sonoma Ranch. Those tax dollars are not being used for downtown. That tax increment district is the best thing that could have happened to downtown, so that they could finance it without taking out of the coffers other money that would be used for roads or some other industry or infrastructure improvement. The thing about downtown is that's where the culture is. That's where I grew up at. That's where I drove down Main Street in the parade for Mayfield High School in 1971. That's where my grandfather worked, in the bar that was the Penguin Bar that everybody knew. There is nothing downtown after 5 o'clock right now, and until you have a life down there, you can't bring people into wanting to have interest to it. And there are several events that have been put in place now that start at 5 o'clock, but the point is,
How do you change that, Dolores?
there's no businesses there.
How do you change that? I talked to a restaurant, former restaurateur, and she told me the only way to get a bunch more restaurants down in downtown Las Cruces is if we change the liquor laws. That you say yes.
Exactly.
You agree.
Because
Okay.
people want to get out of work and they want to have a cocktail and they might want to have dinner with it, and then they want to go home. But they might want to come on a Saturday night and take their family out. And this is not, I'm not talking about just a straight old bar out there. I'm talking about ways to bring families and adults together.
Of course, as you know, the folks who currently own licenses to sell liquor would not want to change because it would devalue their licenses. Does this get to a larger point that one of the other challenges we have at city government, but also state and federal, is vested interest, financial interest, campaign donations, that this is really how a lot of public policy is decided. It isn't necessarily on the biggest net effect, but the protected special interest. And I want to hear your thoughts on this.
People have been holding on to properties downtown that are vacant, waiting for that boom, waiting for someone to pay the top dollar for that property, and it can't happen unless you have some kind of economic engine that's going down there. So you're caught in this catch-22 that says, well, I want to sell you my property, but I really want high dollar for it, and they're not ready to do that.
In terms of liquor licenses, there have been folks who've suggested maybe a special license that could only go for downtown, for development.
Exactly.
But again, this never gets anywhere.
It doesn't move forward because there isn't an interest in moving a restaurant down there that wants to do that. Until those restaurateurs want to create the competition that it takes to be down there, then you can get the council to move on whatever regulation they need to to adjust in order to make that happen.
So other thoughts on this? This is going to be an issue in the city election. Folks who do have an economic interest, and we have heard of more money going into the city elections through political action committees, for instance. So essentially, what are your thoughts on this, and how much of a problem this is in our city, our state, and really the nation?
I think sometimes it's a problem, not all the times, but obviously special interests can buy some things and create that type of influence. It's concerning if it gets stuck into city government. Going back to the downtown, the plaza down there, I'm absolutely excited. It's going to be great, but more things have to come in. But having seen how dead the plaza was, or the downtown area was, and granted it's not full all the time now, but there's a lot of life in there. It's nice to see. It's coming up, and those businesses will come. Obviously, some regulations need to be changed, and that goes back to what you say, that we got to make sure special interest doesn't push it one way or the other. It needs to be fair, and there's politically what's fair. So
We saw the special interests with the minimum wage question. 3 city councilors were targeted by supposedly independent individuals, but some media people did investigate, and they found that they were backed by a specific group, and it got pretty ugly. So we need to be really careful about allowing special interests to pour their money in when they have one specific agenda that could potentially harm the city.
Okay. Well, before 2008, the city was growing in leaps and bounds, and some of you probably remember that. And since the housing market crash, the development has been slow to moderate here in Las Cruces. What do you think the city council's approach should be in shaping or not shaping the future growth of Las Cruces? What do you think the city should look like, say, in 20 years?
As a newcomer, I think water is going to be a deciding factor on development here. And from what I've learned about the water situation, I don't even know that the state knows what the impact of population would be on down here, because we get our water from aquifer. I don't know that anybody knows what number of people this aquifer can really handle, and that's and I think it's mainly because they don't have a lot of means of monitoring the aquifer to know, how much we're taking out.
So you'd like to see that considered?
I think that when they're talking about development, it's not only making the developers provide the infrastructure. They need to, I think, water is going to be in the Southwest is big, but I don't know if we've really addressed that here in statewide, much less down here. That's how from what I've learned about the water situation, I don't know that we really know what the handling, what number of people could really live in this area.
Over the last however many years, and especially since Dr. Garcia took over utilities, there is a water plan. It's a 20-year water plan. It's updated every 5 years by state law, and that water plan tells you what you can manage and how many people you can take in. And although we are in a drought, although we suffer when it's hot outside, the whole plan is in place. We do know what's in the aquifers.
Do you feel like we have an accurate accounting of what's in that aquifer? I mean, that's what I've always heard, is that yes, we have a plan, but we don't know exactly what our resources are there.
Well, but that plan is updated through the engineering and all the hydro people that have, all those experts. So we have to rely on the experts when that's all we've got. Because I'm just the layperson who doesn't know how I know how the aquifer refurbishes itself. I know how it gets water back into it. But I don't have that expertise to say how much is pumped out for every individual home. Those kind of numbers are there, and you have to start somewhere.
Other thoughts on development and where we should be, and you specifically said 20 years, right? Yeah, 20 years from now. That's,
for example.
So looking to the future, I mean, for those of us who want to stay in Las Cruces, what do we want our future to be?
We need to infill. We need to quit going out and leave our farms alone, because this is an agricultural county, and we need to leave our farmland alone unless that farmer wants to sell his land, and that's his right to do so, his or her right to do so. But we have so many vacant properties infill, which is within the center of town, within a 5-mile radius, that needs to be taken care of. Why keep expanding out until you fix what's already within
the city,
the region of where you're trying to affect?
Other thoughts on that?
I think Las Cruces in 20 years is going to be a very dynamic city. I think, as we mentioned, the culture here is very nice. It's very warm. It's very open. But on top of that, there are opportunities with Doña Ana County as a whole to be able to grow to a level that I think has not been, and it's expected for us down in Santa Teresa, but it's not necessarily expected in Las Cruces. There's a lot of developments happening down on the border that will, I guess, guide economic development away from El Paso and bring it towards New Mexico. And we'll see, all these jobs being created, more manufacturing plants coming in here, more cooperation with the city of Juarez. We're going to see maybe a rail bypass come through New Mexico and take it away from El Paso and bring it over here.
Other thoughts on growth and development?
Just
When I heard you say we need to fix what's going on in already established areas of the city, I take it you mean the El Paseo area, even the downtown area, close to
all the way to Telshore.
Mesilla. Fix what's going on there, and get people coming back to those areas, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like you're referring to maybe improving infrastructure in these older areas of the city,
Right.
before you start, expanding beyond what you already have. Is that
Some of us will remember that Toyota wanted to come to Las Cruces. It was in the middle 90s, and the city the constituents went into an uproar. No, we don't want Toyota here. They're going to bring in 5,000 employees. They were going to be up on the West Mesa, and there was a big disagreement across this community whether Toyota would move here, and they chose outside of San Antonio based on how this community reacted to a company like that coming.
Very interesting.
You'll find that in the Sun News back in that time.
So we only have about 5 minutes left, and I have another question. I don't think I've lived anywhere else, and I've lived in the Mid-Atlantic, the Midwest, and the Northeast, where there is such a short amount of time between filing to run and then actually the election. Las Cruces, my goodness, candidates don't officially file till late September. Is that long enough for folks, to be able to decide who they're going to vote for? No, I see a lot of heads saying no.
It's probably not, but it's also probably in the candidate's interest to file before the deadline in order to get their name out sooner. I think that's up to political strategy of the people campaigning. If they want to take advantage of filing earlier and announcing earlier, or if they want to do it at the very last minute.
But as voters,
it
sounds like you all feel like you need more time.
This is an unusual year. Usually by now you've had a lot of candidates come out and say they're going to run, and it's been very hush-hush for, this is unusual. Usually by July 1st you know who's on the slate, and anybody who jumps in at the last minute they're just jumping in. But this is an unusual year, especially because there's a mayor's race involved in all of this. There's a lot of hush-hush about what's going on and a lot of rumor out there, and 42 days for an election is ridiculous.
I think maybe in a smaller population base, that would be okay. Yeah, it's not a lot of time at all.
That's where the charter could also be changed.
I think we have time for one more question.
Okay, well, let's see. If you had to rate the city of Las Cruces government on a typical A to F grading scale, like in school, what rating would you assign it, and why?
I'd say B. I'm happy with my 4 years in living in the city, so I have no problems particularly.
I'd give them a B+. just seeing what I've seen over the years, I think they're doing a good job. They've done, it's more on the positive side than the negative, that's for sure.
Same here.
1B, 2B pluses. Any other votes?
I'm very happy in Las Cruces. I love living here. I'm not sure if I can put a letter grade on it. It'd be probably B plus, A minus. I'm very happy in Las Cruces.
Just real quickly, what about this whole idea that the city government is not business friendly enough? Any of you buy into that at all?
I do.
Okay.
I believe that the city has not been friendly to business, and I'm not talking about developers and contractors. I'm talking of business across the board. I owned a business in Las Cruces for 11 years. It was difficult to deal with the city, and I had a business that I bought that had 10 years prior to it, so 21 years in this community. And during that time, before I was ever a city councilor, I struggled with the city to work out my business, and it was a retail business. And so
what in
that has
particular?
not changed to
red
this day.
tape that you had to
Red
deal
tape and just getting through City Hall. It's not an easy process. It's not a permitting process. You want to remodel a building so that you can get in there. You're delayed months. Talk to the CVS that just built on the corner of Main Street. How long they were delayed and why they don't want to build another one here. And the city processes in getting those businesses, because it's dollars to them. And I know everybody wants to argue about, well, they have deep pockets. Well, if they didn't have deep pockets, they can't give back to the community. So that's the problem. You got to get the bureaucratic baloney out of the whole thing.
Okay. Well, thank you all for sharing your thoughts today and for helping to increase the dialogue as we get ready for the Las Cruces municipal elections. We appreciate it. And thank you to the Las Cruces Sun News for partnering with us here at KRWG. We'll have more programming in the weeks ahead. Thank you at home for joining us. I'm Fred Martino. Have a great week.